everybody. Welcome to Improv FAQ at Length, a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. And Bob and I are joined by our good friend, Sheevani Desai. How's it going, Sheevani?
Yay!
Hi. Hey, guys. It's going well. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing all right.
Doing well.
So, Sheevani, you are a good friend of ours from originally from the Detroit area, and now you're out in Denver. And how long have you been out in Denver now?
Oh, man. It's like 2.5 years now. In August, it'll be 3 years.
Wow.
I know.
That went fast.
It did. It really did. Yeah.
And so the topic of this episode is going to be on character work because one of your you have plenty of strengths. One of your main strengths is really strong character work. And so we're looking forward to picking your brain about it and talking shop about what goes into strong characters, fun characters, and, a variety or Rolodex of them. Just give us an update on what is the current lay of the land with the improv scene? Because in Denver, because you got Nick Armstrong and Josh and Brian that are taking over Voodoo. Tell us what's going on there.
Nick and Josh have taken over the majority kind of ownership of Voodoo Comedy Lounge. Or I think it's just Voodoo Comedy now. And the former owner, I think, still has a 25% stake in it. But yeah, as far as decision making and all that kind of stuff, it's and the direction of the theater, it's Josh and Nick, and it's been awesome because it's the sense I got when I first arrived in Denver, as far as the improv scene, was it was pretty. It was an odd time because Voodoo was going through some issues with just kind of the whole it's the same thing I think a lot of theaters are going through with sexual harassment or just the kind of all that kind of stuff coming to the forefront and treating everyone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it really was. It was interesting because I kind of came in while that was all blowing up. So I was warned to not go to certain theaters and not to associate with certain people. It was kind of hard to navigate the landscape at that time because I was like, I just want to perform. I just want to get involved. But yeah, I think, with Josh and Nick coming on last year, it just gave this, I don't know, for me at least, a sense of calm and a sense of excitement for how things are going to be handled, especially at Voodoo in the future. And they've really kind of lived up to that, and they've really made it a place where there's a lot of inclusion. There's, everything about what was the issue when I first got there about making sure everyone's treated fairly and appropriately. It's just at the forefront of how they approach everything. So, and, both those guys are just veterans when it comes to managing theaters or obviously the camps or, just all these different things that they've been involved in. And it's just been, it's been exciting because I don't know, I sort of had an issue. I didn't have a very easy time finding my new improv home for a while. And now that that's been feeling a lot better because there's just a good option for someone with my style of improv. And there's also another great, very established theater called the Bovine Metropolis Theater. And it's interesting. It's a clean theater. So it's family friendly. There's no, it's all, they call it smart and from the heart. So there's not a lot of, there's no.
I like it.
Yeah. And it's a good option because, for someone like me who has kids, it's they can come to a rehearsal with me and we don't have to worry about, we rehearse as if we're in front of the audience. So we're not cursing. We're not, using blue humor or anything like that. So, that's actually been a really great experience. That's where I competed, and they've got their annual Denver's Next Improv Star Show, which is just kind of, really well run. This theater's been around since the 90s. And so it's like, they just know how to, it's kind of a well-oiled machine at this point. So for me, it was good to see like, okay, good. I've got this option to actually be on a stage and just keep going with improv. But, Voodoo's kind of that, the new home, I guess, where I can, let the expletives fly if I need to. Get raunchy, because I don't know.
Time to get raunchy.
Really my strengths. I know you said character work was my strengths, but
kids, put the earmuffs on. Mama's got to play.
Yeah, you can't come to Voodoo, Faye and Emerson.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just it was an interesting time to arrive back in 2017 because it was just kind of like, it felt like things were almost like so spread out because people were wondering like, well, I don't want to go to Voodoo anymore. Where should I go? And I don't want to do clean humor, so I'm not going to go to Bovine. And then there was this other theater that was kind of starting up that has its own issues. But so it took a while, and it really bummed me out, actually, just coming from a very, and granted, I think, Denver's pretty young. I mean, I that's the sense I get, while Detroit is like, obviously with Planet Ant, and then, with Second City being there, and then with Go, it's just like, it just feels more foundational in Detroit, where it's like here in Denver, I think people are still trying to get their footing for the most part, but there's a lot of talent here too. That being said, there are veterans and talent out here that's like very legit.
Very cool. And that can be a really exciting time. Yeah. That like two things that all that brings to mind is for me, I experienced like the same thing coming to New York because I was around the same time, June in the same year where you got to Denver in August. I was like, I came in and there's all this, the big town hall meeting at one theater and people leaving and, leadership changing. And then another place that people are like, this is where everyone's going. And the next day I know that place is closing down and, there's brand new places that are cropping up and whatnot. And so I feel you on like coming into a new community at that time and trying to find your home at a place where things are pretty radically changing during that time. But then on the other hand, with the development of things in a really high potential, high talent community, which does, I mean, like you said, Bovine's been around since the 90s. So like they're the I can't remember who's the name of the
it's
guy
Eric.
that owns the place. Eric.
Eric and Denise are the owners. They're a married couple and they own it. Yep.
And Eric studied with Del Close, right? Didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't he from Chicago? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He was there for a while. Yeah. He's legit. I mean, when it comes to like their curriculum and how they run their school and all of that. It's like they know what they're doing and they know what they want to teach. They know how they want to teach it. It's probably the biggest producer of improvisers in Denver. That's where people go to take their classes. So
yeah,
wow, that's really cool.
And then for the rest of the landscape, though, I mean that what's going on with like Voodoo or anywhere else kind of reminds me of some of the qualities of Detroit's improv community when I got started. Was like Second City and Inferno were just closing and Go was just opening up. And so it was kind of like, sparse when I got to Go Comedy, but it was, this high potential. I got to move very quickly into the community because it was in a place where they were trying to build from a new makeup of everything. So And it seems like from what I've been able to see from afar online and whatnot, that you've been getting very involved pretty quickly with a lot of things there in the time that you've been there. Is that right?
Yeah. When I first, like, again, it was a little bit shaky when I first got here, but I did get involved with a theater that's still around. It's, I feel like that theater is now going through the growing pains that sort of Voodoo was going through when I got here. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a complicated situation. But anyway,
Sure.
the person what isn't complicated about improv theaters?
Right.
But anyway, this one person in the community reached out to me, and I had met him at Omaha. So at the Omaha Improv Festival, there were so many different like Denver troops, and it was an interesting. It was a really good festival for me to go to before I moved there, because it was like I met all these Denver people. So when I got here, I had a good like handful of contacts. So and just through that, right away I started performing and it was like a pop-up kind of environment where this producer, he had a space and he was just like, well, this is where we do our just once a week improv shows. But it was like one of those things where if you just went every Wednesday, you just met kind of like you met so many different improvisers, because he would just bring in he would have a lineup of different troupes every week. And it was through that where I just, just kind of how you have to do it. You have to just meet people and go to shows and go to jams and
find your crowd. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and it really, I felt so lucky because the troupe that I've been a part of since almost the beginning, since like November of 2017, we formed through that contact of mine, and we're called the Notorious VAG, and it's all ladies, and that was a big push then too, because there were not a lot of all female troops at that time, which is so like now that I say that, I'm like, this was less than 3 years ago, and it was like at that time it was like we were one of maybe 3 all female troops in Denver. So yeah, that was something that was really important to this awesome woman, Katie, who was kind of the founder of the group. And she was just like, we need a space for women in Denver to feel like they can come out and perform and jam with us. And we started doing like a ladies jam, which we're still doing every month. And now we're doing it at Voodoo. And it's just like, that was one of those needs, right? Where it was just kind of like, hey, this community's growing. We need to figure out what the issues are. And it was great to be a part of sort of growing that whole thing too, because it was interesting. And it was just kind of that thing I think we see in so many communities where it was just like the boys club or just really male dominated. Some, a lot of times women would talk about their bad experiences on stage and just like the typical things that we sort of go through with always being made the wife and the secretary and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a cool experience. And now there are multiple, the number of just like female troops have really grown. And now there are multiple different types of jams that our female troops host. And, so it's like, I feel like now there's no matter what type of performer you are as a female, like you have a space for yourself to go and jam and feel safe. So it's been cool to be a part of that.
That's awesome.
I will say that it's interesting coming out here. This is a very long form town. Like it's not like short form is sort of, I remember I also started coaching a troupe pretty quickly after I got here. I was recruited into doing that because someone was leaving to move to Utah. So they asked me if I was interested, and it was a well-established group of improvisers. So I kind of came into that, and I was like, hey guys, like, why don't we just warm up with some short form games? And they were like, oh God, like it was just, you would have thought I told them like we were going to do like Shakespeare for an hour. Like it was just, actually they probably would have liked that better, but it was so funny. I'm like, it gets the blood pumping, it gets your mind going. Like, I don't care. You guys I'm like, short form has a value. I know you guys want to perform it. But yeah, that's been really interesting too. That a lot of the well-established shows in town, especially at Voodoo, and now that's changing. They're evolving, now with Nick and Josh. But like, yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, like short form is just like a hacky type improv. And I don't know, it was so interesting coming from, my education at Go and obviously like the showdowns and like that's the money making show. Like that's more palatable to like the, mass audience and whatnot. But yeah, it was kind of like okay. But now again, like things are evolving. Bovine has actually had a short form show that they've had for years. So they see the value in that, but Voodoo's trying to, start their own kind of short form, show too and troupe. But yeah, it's kind of like, well, there's an advantage for me too, because I've done quite a bit of short form in my my time. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing. I was just like, whoa, I didn't, the reaction I got to like anything short form mentioned, it was hilarious.
That's incredible.
I feel it. Because it's Josh Nichols, right?
Yes.
And he ran Spectacle's improv engine, or maybe still does. I don't know if they had a theater venue of their own, but that Spectacles does a lot of short form, right?
I'm not sure.
I think Go Comedy did like a playbook swap of games with Spectacles with Josh.
Yes, now you mentioned that. Yes, they did.
So yeah. I'm sure it is so funny, the different communities that either put a stigma on long form being pretentious or short form being hacky. Yeah. But let's crack into some character work talk here, and because I'm curious, maybe we can even talk between like short form and long form, and different mediums. Like, what's like the best way for your approach to character, or like when it comes to doing strong character work, like what medium do you feel like you thrive most in or get most excited to play with, Sheevani? Is it improv, sketch, short form? Like what brings out characters for you?
I think the medium in which I love to really kind of flex those character muscles, that sounds weird, is I mean, honestly, sketch, just because you have that time to really flesh it out and really figure out how you want to play it. But in the improv world, I think, I don't know, I love it in both, but I do approach it differently in both. Like in a short form game, I could do something that won't take, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I would go with a character that I can sustain for maybe a 3-minute game. But in long form, when I make a character choice, I want to make sure I'm making a choice that I can sustain for however long, the set is. Because I've done that too. Like where in long form, I might make a choice where I can't do that voice for too long, or maybe a physicality I've chosen is really hard to keep up, or I forget, I don't want to overcomplicate a character I do in a long form set. And granted, obviously the scene could be a minute long and that's okay, but I like to bring back the characters too that I've established. But yeah, so I think in short form, I'll definitely go for something wackier or something just a little bit more out there strokes. Or bold. Yeah, not as grounded maybe. Yeah. Because I think no matter what type of character you do, I like it to come from a grounded place. I mean, granted, if you're doing like a talking frog or something, that can still be grounded. But I think that with the physicality of like a talking frog, that would do that probably in a short form versus a long form. But yeah, I think for sketch for me, I love to be able to take that written dialogue and figure out how this character is going to approach it. You have more time with that, obviously, but like with improv, there's so many awesome choices. But I also think like, okay, if I'm doing this for a minute, I need to figure out like what the best way to get the point across of the scene, but also like make it interesting with a good character. Yeah.
What do y'all? When it comes to new characters or like fleshing out a character, Like if you have a sketch, and let's say that like the character isn't really it's not written into it. It's not like
Sure.
the characteristics are baked
Defined.
into the script. Yeah. In the direction or anything. One, how do you kind of like workshop or find the right character, or do you go to like things that like have maybe things that you like to play around with in improv, and you're like, let me start with like these kind of these attributes, or like the body. Where do you kind of start to build a character when you apply it in a sketch?
Sure. I if it's something written and like you said, not very defined as far as like character traits, I try to find a familiarity with the text, I guess. Like what does this remind me of? Because I think the reason I identify with doing character work so much, and that's something that I really love to do, is because ever since I can remember, I've just sort of been a mimic and an observer of like just people around me. I've done that as long as I can remember. And so, and I know this isn't, maybe something everyone does, but I always have like a bank of people. Like what does, like when I'm reading a sketch and it's not defined, I'll be like, well, who does this remind me of? And how would this person A or B from my past, or someone I just encountered in this cashier or whatever it is. Like I'm always, I'm walking through life, always just kind of observing and absorbing. So it's just kind of like, I try and, at least identify with whatever the sketch situation is, even maybe how the phrasing is, it's like, oh, this reminds me of this guy or this, a person I knew. And, but then also I think that's the best way to do it. I'm trying to think. I did a sketch show last summer, and and it happens. And look, I'm not the one that gets so offended if I made a mom all the time. And in fact, I wrote 3 of the sketches where I was a mom, so it wasn't like a big deal. I do try and not be the stereotypical, like, that suburban mom. I feel like everyone has a suburban mom character, and I've done it too. I've done that, like the typical, like suburban mom, like thing. And, and I do try and find, kind of surprising approaches with that versus doing that typical thing that I think most people have seen. I don't want it to be so heightened to the point where it's like, okay, we've seen that, but like we did this sketch last year that I actually wrote. It was me and a good friend of mine. And so the thing in Denver, it's interesting, or in Colorado, I should say, they have this trend of people who are native to Colorado, born and brought up in Colorado, have native bumper stickers. And it's like a weird passive aggressive, almost like, hey guys, I'm really from Colorado.
Pure blood,
yes, because I mean, let's face it. Like people are coming to Colorado, and I mean, it's hard to find people who are from here.
It's a booming town, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, so it was just one of those things that I just found very interesting. So I wrote this sketch about 2 moms running into each other, and I played the native, and my my friend played the mom who had a native bumper sticker, but she had just moved to Colorado like 3 years ago. So we just kind of have this exchange. But I remember we were rehearsing it, and we were both doing that, like, oh my God, oh, kids and soccer, like just being that, and we both kind of looked at each other, and this friend of mine, she's incredibly talented. And we were just like, God, this feels so, this like, we've seen it, So we just decided to play it almost just very almost like ourselves. Like, how would we do this? Like we're not that type of mom. Like, she's a mother too. Like, we're not that. And it actually makes it funnier when you kind of dampen the sort of caricature of that mom character, so it was like, so that's what I mean in a sketch where our instinct was to just do that, like have the Kate from whatever, like John and Kate Plissé, like stupid hairdo, like, we were giving that, and even, our director even loved it, but we were like, and it just didn't feel right for us. So we ended up just playing it kind of very grounded, very just realistic, how we would kind of approach it. And I think that that worked so much better versus, giving the audience that kind of, again, that caricature versus a character.
Yeah.
That's a distinction.
No, that makes sense because it's, for lack of a better term, is kind of a subtle joke. So starting subtle, then building, and progressing. I can see how that'd be hilarious. But also, what you've been talking about kind of reminds me of something I heard Jamie Moyer say one time during a workshop to another female. I just happened to be in the room because she was asked a question like, I get stuck playing the girlfriend mom all the time. How do I defend that? And Jamie had this really cool point of view. Girlfriend and mom is just a title. You show your range, Barbara Billingsley playing Leave It to Beaver's mom and Peg Bundy are two mothers, but they have completely different relationships. You can make it interesting and make your own, and don't let people define you. Like,
absolutely.
And she's such a strong performer. So it's like, wow, when she talks, yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Really
I took
cool
that
voice.
workshop. Yeah. I took that. I think it was at Planet Ant. And, I got so much out of that because I think sometimes we get so, and it's an important issue, obviously. And I think it's, it's an involvement of the entire community, which is why in our jams that we do, we call it Jam with Ladies Jam, because we evolved it from being like, oh, only women come up and play with us, to like, well, look, if we want men to be able to play with women in newer and fresher ways, we should invite them on stage with us too, and not shame them if they do like whatever, make a improv mistake that we're trying to get away from, but like but figure out ways on stage, because we've all been on stage when we felt like, okay, we're being made to be this stereotypical whatever female character it is, but to Jamie's point, how do we come at that at a totally different angle and flip it, so we're not this Barbara Billingsley, we become the Peg Bundy, doing the unexpected with characters is one of the so fun. It's just so much fun, because and I've done it too, even though like I do, I love doing characters. I've gotten in that rut too, where I'm just like, I'm doing the same voice. I'm doing the same physicality and like what, so like, I just almost have to kind of go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, I don't hate this character, but how can I freshen it up?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just, you're talking about the scene where the, archetypical mom that you were workshopping or trying to get away from, and which kind of made me think of like, when it comes to character, sometimes people will separate like, okay, this scene is more premise based, and obviously you can't just like, you're not going to remove characters from a scene just because it's for any reason, but like if it's more premise based, and maybe that scene was a little bit more about the commentary on the native versus non-native thing. Yeah, like that's kind of one type of dominant focus of a scene of a game, and like, how do you think about the difference between like scenes like that versus like if a scene or like a run of scenes in a long form show is about a character, like where does that line get crossed where it's like, oh, this is really about the character and not about the specific premise or situation that they're in. We just want to see this character behave like how do you know if you have a character like that when to drop the premise and run with it?
I think so much of it has to do with how the scene initiated, or how what was the initial setup for the character. And we've all heard you have to have a want, so if it's character driven, if all the situations are character driven, I think it's important to have a consistency in what that character's goal is or what they want. Like, it could be a bunch of scenes, and if the character's like, I just always want to like help someone and everything, you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, having that want, so that there is a through line through the set. If it's the same character and in every scene it's a totally different kind of outcome, it can still work. I mean, I've seen that work, but I think one of the things that I've seen done so many times is just someone playing the same character, but just completely flipping what they've wanted or the point of like, what they've been established to do, or, it's just kind of like, okay, it can still work because if you're a really strong actor, you can make it work and somehow justify it. But then you get lost in those details of like, oh, well, what was the reason that they suddenly flipped their want or whatever. So I've seen that before, and I've done it before where I'm just kind of like, all right, this is more about the character. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So James, I think it was a late night show we did at Go where we did that Jacinda Cooper character that I still do to this day. It's that radio woman who does all the personalities herself because no one wants to work with her, and it's like been one of my favorite characters, and I've brought it back a few times, and so she's the one driving, like the scene's about her, like it's like about what Jacinda is doing in that particular, but her want is always like, I want people to respect me as a radio person. And, no one can work with me, but it's just because, I'll justify that however I want. But like that to me is an example where it's like, okay, you can use a character to drive a story, but it's because of this character's, goal or driving force within their own kind of backstory that makes it work for whatever scene you can do,
Yeah. It's a very SNL type way of approaching a character. Like when you do it that particular style, like when you get the eccentric and then you just fish out of water that character. Yeah. So it's almost becomes like a situational comedy. Like, oh, what happens when we take, Stefan and make him work at the Gap and let's see, it's and it's fun. Like it's great. I love it when you have a couple characters that you just enjoy playing, and it, you just get to be yourself and kind of surprise yourself. Like, what can I do with this now? It almost like when you have action figures when you're a kid, like, who He-Man is, but what we're going to do with He-Man today? That's gonna be fun.
Right. Cause I mean, it's like you're coming into the story, of that character that's already been established. So it's like, you can just, the world's your oyster because it's like, okay, you already know what their personality is. You already know what their point of view of the world is. So it's like, how would He-Man, I'm just going to say working at the Gap, what would he do at the Gap?
What happens when they work together? Yeah. Let's see this relationship. That might be the game.
Right.
James, do you have a character that you love playing? Is there like I wouldn't want to call it a go-to, but we kind of all have those. Do you have one of those?
I don't. Well, like lately, I've been thinking about this because as we're stuck in quarantine, I'm like trying to find ways. There's a lot of character work going on because there's a lot of solo to camera recording going. So I've been thinking about that more lately, and I've been finding those characters. I love this character Roy, who I use for a how-to vlog parody where he tries to do how-to videos on stuff that he doesn't know how to do. And so needs to look it up as he's doing the video.
I love that.
And he's very harmless of just and I see because I see these videos of people being like, oh, well, so you want to, well, wait a minute. What is this? Well, I don't know what that is, but we'll move on. Yeah. Yeah. So I like that guy. I think the thing that I used to do though more because I'm a little less like you were saying, Sheevani, of being a constant observer and making mental notes of people that I run into to draw character inspiration from. I'm a little bit more my character inspiration is more cartoons and fictional characters for me. And so in a showdown, which is the short form show at Go, you get on stage and if you're doing the show, you do 3 or 4 proper scenes, and then otherwise you're doing kind of challenge games. But like you get a chance to do a few characters, and for me, I would kind of be like, okay, I kind of have like this character and and then I have like playing straight character myself, and then I have a little bit more like whatever, just like a handful of characters that I know that like okay, I can check that off the list, and I probably don't want to. I would just want to make sure that I'm keeping it dynamic. Yeah, I'll do that in a show. Not that I have a planned order that I'm going to use them, but I know that those are kind of like my my points on my star of characters, where I'm like, okay. And so that's kind of where I'm like, I like kind of going this direction, and then I want to make sure that I go this direction too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I've been finding more characters lately.
Yeah. When that troupe I was coaching for a while, it was such an interesting group because I had a couple like legit like theater actors in there. I had a stand-up, a guy that was a stand-up, and then I had just some solid improvisers who just tended to play a version of themselves, in every scene. And it was just like, and then the actors would always play a over the top, like sort of, So it was so like, and it was, again, like I didn't want to come at that as, like with a judgmental eye, in the sense that like, this is wrong, that's right. Because obviously everyone has their strengths and differences. Like for instance, the guy that was a stand-up, he did no characters. Like he literally would come on and just do bits as himself. Yeah. But it would kill. I mean, every time he would come on, it was just, he would have a one-liner that would just blow up the scene. It was so funny. So I was like, I couldn't be like, you really need to do characters. It's like, well, no, that's not going to work for you. But I would have him exercise in, because I wasn't like, I need you, the next show you guys do, I need you to see like 3 characters you do. But that wasn't his strength. But he did express to me, like, I want to get out of my comfort zone. I do feel like I'm getting in a rut when I'm going on stage. Okay. And I think he was using improv as a tool to help his stand-up. So, but he was just, and so I would like, I mean, those rehearsals where I'd be like, okay, I would literally tell him, I'm like, you are a 65-year-old woman who loves like to watch her squirrels outside her window. Like I would just give him some weird thing. And then like, then all of a sudden he'd come out with his voice and, and it wasn't, and I told him, I'm like, this isn't for the goal for you to like, okay, remember this character, remember what she did and do it next time. I was just like, I want you to like feel a freedom within yourself that A, this is possible, and B, like, maybe you would find a time to use that, or, I just want you to know that it's a possibility within yourself. And, but yeah, to your point, James, like I, especially in showdowns, I felt like I did the same thing and every short form. So that Denver's Next Improv Star show I did, it was a very interesting format. First of all, being judged in improv was very odd for me. I never got to the point where I was comfortable, like on stage doing that show. I really wrestled with it too. It was because it was, it's like a reality-based show. They have like the 3 judges. After you do your scene, you stand up at the front of the stage and they kind of break down what they liked, what they didn't like. And so it was nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. It was totally, I was so glad I did it, but wow. Yeah, but I did. And Paul was so great. Paul and Faye. My son was not interested. But Paul and Faye, he came to one show and he was in the front row. And like they have those theater seats that snap back up. Oh, yeah. And they're bouncy. And it's an old theater, so it's squeaky. And I'm literally on stage and I can hear him going, wee, wee, and he's just like playing. And I'm like, oh God.
This Paul's is like, more fun.
It was. I was like, okay, he can't come to the show anymore.
I hear mom talk all the time. This seat is a one chance opportunity and I'm going to use it, man.
Oh my God.
We don't have any of these at home. I have plenty of mom time.
He was like, this up here, I have no interest in, but this seat is great. But anyway, so Paul and Faye were kind of regulars. It was a 16-week run and I made it to the finals. So like they were there almost every week. But anyway, it did get to the point where I was we would only have 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how many contestants were left, to do these scenes. And we only find out what we're doing, like right on stage. They tell us what the challenge is. And so within that environment, I was going to like maybe the same 3 characters. And I on stage could feel myself wanting to let go of the character in the middle of it because I was sick of doing it, and even Paul, he never really criticizes me, even though I'm like, no, tell me like real feedback. He actually finally was like, you gotta stop doing that like, dude character. And I was like, I know, it's so annoying. I'm annoying myself doing it. And he's like, yeah, I just feel like you've been doing it. Like he was so nervous to like tell me. I'm like, no, please, I need to hear this. And even Faye was like, yeah, that wasn't your best night, And I was like, yeah, no, you're right. But yeah, it was like in that environment that sort of like, I was nervous. Yeah. Like I just, you get a challenge and then you want to like, you have like 2 or 3 minutes to shine and the judges are going to tell you what they think after. Yeah. I'm like, then I would go like, hey guys. And I'm like, damn it, I've done it. I got to stick with it.
Yeah.
You ever get stuck?
Keep that
kind of like that.
Promise.
I've seen and been part of shows where for some reason everyone gets stuck doing a Southern accent in like every scene. Or like being British. Yeah. It's like, how, like, and it's unconscious. Like, it's so weird when you're like, this is my go-to now. I guess, like, I can't stop.
I know.
This is a different character, not the same.
Now we're all at the Gap.
You're right.
How do you think about point of view? You talked a little bit about it. Being what defines a character and how that a point of view can be the thing that you carry on from scene to scene and play with. Is that something that you consciously recognize or think about or try to make a decision for when you have like a new character that you are not familiar with that's coming through the improv? Are you like, oh shit, I think this character has this point of view, or is it something that you like are more intuitive about, and then after the fact you're like you kind of dissect and are like, yeah, what was it? It's the radio character that just wants to be respected. Like, what point in performing does that click for you when you have a character that you're working with?
For me, honestly, it's kind of from the get-go. And it just works for me to be able to establish that early on. Even if I don't like it later, I'm like, well, I think I've seen so much, and I've done it too, where I've like I said, I've like maybe flipped the wand, or I've kind of diverted from the original kind of point of view of the character. And that's when I always feel like the shittiest after a show, or I'm like, God, I wanted this person, or I started this out to be this, and then it made no sense for me to divert the way I was going. And in all honesty, it's probably something the audience wouldn't have really thought was a big deal. Like they probably saw like, oh, okay, well now she wants this, or this character wants this. But to me, I'm always, I like beat myself up a lot about that, where I'm like, God, if I just had stuck to, that original point of view, I think it could have been more interesting. Cause you also do that thing in improv where it's like, you're listening, and then you might get influenced by what that, I don't know. It's like the struggle between yes anding and then also keeping true to the character, because it is possible, but at the same time, it's not easy. Like if your want for the character is sort of going against what your scene partner's doing, you're not negating them if you're sticking to that point of view. You're just making it a different situation, right? But I don't know. Sometimes in my head, I'll get in that, oh God, if I say no, though, am I not yes-anding? And that's the nuance of improv that I think it takes a long time to get comfortable with. And I know I still will kind of fall in those like, those mistakes every now and then of just being like, I'll abandon what this character wanted because now the scene partner introduced whatever they did,
Yeah. And sometimes too, you're trying to like throw a curveball. You're like, cause it is, there's a line of like what you were talking about. We were saying earlier that like, it's nice to find unexpected ways to define a character or not to rely on cliche. And so sometimes I'm just speaking from my personal experience, is that like if I know what I'm supposed to do, either my mischief trigger goes off and goes, oh, I'm gonna shake it, or I go, it's too obvious, that can't be it, and then I'll try to make a more, I guess what it is trying to be more clever or trying to be smarter than the simple fact of who the character is, and then that'll get in my way and break things.
Yeah.
That's why, like, usually if I'm establishing a character, particularly like in a long form set, I like to use the game's things you never hear or world's worst. Mm-hmm. You know, into a situation like it's just a simple way to pick a want, and just to stick with the want. But I've done the same thing, especially like if I'm playing with maybe someone who's a little newer, like a little more green. Like I will give up my want to protect them.
Totally.
Like I think I get a little too, and it's such a mistake. Like, oh, I know at the beginning I said, well, I don't want to go through that door, but they asked me 3 times, and now they look uncomfortable, so I better do it, you know? And
now they look uncomfortable. Okay, I'm going through the door.
Okay, you win. You win this time. And maybe justify it with, like, I usually wouldn't do this, but because it's you, here I go through the door. You know?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Bob, because I think doing now more jams with this monthly jam we're doing with Notorious VAG, and we're actually co-hosting with another fantastic all-female troupe. It's amazing how you have to like adjust that when you are playing with newer people. But I think that's such a great muscle to exercise, because for just that example you gave, it's like, all right, well, because you're also sort of teaching them too, right? Like the newer people on stage, like how to like navigate that. And so, like, well, I normally wouldn't do this, but you're desperate. I don't know. Like, it's just, there's different ways to do that. And it is such a challenge for people. Like if you're more used to playing with more established people. And I remember hearing that at Go too, like it is so valuable for everyone on that stage to be a part of that jam, because the veterans will probably experience something new. And then certainly the students are, getting their lessons as well. But it's, that's the hard part to me sometimes with character work is staying true to a character when you have no idea what the scene partner is going to do or what the situation will call for. But I think a lot of times I struggle with things that the audience wouldn't even know. So that's what my own.
It's hard to see.
Oh yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, Sheevani, if you were speaking of like, jams and people coming up and finding their own development for characters and whatnot, like if you were going to teach a workshop on character, what would you hope that the main takeaway would be for people that took it as like new students or up and coming performers on character work? Like, what's at the heart of it?
Well, I've actually thought about how I would structure something like that. I honestly would just want them to come out with one new character that they've fleshed out. If you have one in your arsenal, I mean, I think that's and I'm talking about people who maybe have zero character work in, or feel like they just don't know how to get characters. One of the most valuable things I did during my Go schooling was it was sort of homework for I can't remember which class it was, but it was a homework assignment where it was like, all right, just write a backstory about 4 different people. Like, let's not even call them characters right now, just 4 different people. Could be people could be family members, it doesn't matter. And then just give a monologue as that person, knowing like what you've written, like 3 or 4 sentences about their background, like how they approach certain things. So I've thought about that. And, I think just being able to at least have one person, a character, and figuring out just everything, like their wants, their background, their look at life, their point of view for just how they approach different situations. I don't know. I would just want them to come out of there feeling like, hey, I've got one other person that I can play on stage. And then hopefully that will spark them to, find new ways of, like, they can take that one character and then kind of evolve it into different characters, but flip the gender of it, flip the the age or something, make that character you have a little kid, So I think I just want them to have a jumping off point to go from as far as creating more things.
Because sometimes like there, I mean, many things in life. Sometimes the first step into it, or the first entry point, is the hardest hurdle to get over. Especially if, like you said, Sheevani, I mean, people who are most interested in it are often people who have no experience in it, or find it very difficult, or unsure of whether or not they're doing it at all, or are capable of it. And so just having that first one. To be like, oh, that's it. And you can make an analogy for the rest, building the rest as they come.
And knowing it's not going to be a perfect character. Nothing's going to be perfect. That first draft is always a piece of shit. Like, that's like, as a writer too, right? Like, as
first
I'm writing,
pancake,
just dump out that first piece of shit and then mold it. It'll get better.
Yeah. Okay, well, it was so awesome to talk to you, Sheevani. And before we go here, as we are all doing things remotely and staying home and staying safe, how can we find things that you're doing online? How can we follow some of the stuff that you do?
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and it was so great to see you guys. I miss you guys so much. I miss Detroit so much, honestly, and all my friends there. So right now, I'm doing a lot of writing. I mean, my blog is something I'm really passionate about. It's impressionista.me. And that's where I'm kind of, it's not necessarily my comedy, but it's where I'm doing a lot of creative, my sort of release for creative stuff. Other than that, my Notorious VAG ladies and I, we were just trying to figure out how to do something online. But we have a Facebook page. We've got Instagram, the Notorious VAG. Can find me there. And it's funny. I don't know. It's like, just with the adjustment of this life and this new normal, I'm trying to figure out, like, do I want to be fun? I mean, not that I don't want to be funny, but I'm just like, I don't know what the best way right now is for me to get any kind of content out there that's funny. But now it's like, after how many 3 weeks, 4 weeks it's been, I'm just kind of like, all right, now I feel like I'm getting stagnant with the stuff I have been doing. And I'm hungry to get out there and do something in this new medium. So hopefully we'll have something. I know Voodoo has its own channel. So Josh has reached out to us to maybe kind of come up with the show. So hopefully we'll have something soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sheevani. Again, great talking to you, and hope to talk to you again soon. Catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.